What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? It's crossover time with Bryce Patrick of Locked on Rangers to discuss World Series hangover for both of our teams. And could we see Jordan Montgomery on his way back to Texas?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. You're listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Miller Thomas. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now to talk about the World Series hangover and a bunch of free agency news, we got Locked on Rangers host Bryce Patrick, so let's bring him on the show. Whoop, whoop. And again, our names are crossed over, but look at this, YouTube audience. Whoa, switcheroo. How you doing, sir?
I am doing all right, my friend. How are you doing? Happy to do this crossover show.
Yeah, and we're going to let Bryce here drive the show. We're doing good. Bryce actually invited me on his show today. So this is a Locked on Diamondbacks, Locked on Rangers crossover. And Bryce, you take it away, sir, because I know you had some thoughts when it came to Jordan Montgomery and free agency this offseason.
I have so many thoughts on former World Series champion Jordan Montgomery coming off of an absolutely awful season with the Diamondbacks, where he was proclaimed the biggest problem. Am I getting that quote correct?
The owner said it's a horrible decision. That's what he went on the
decision. That's what it was. A horrible decision. A negative 1.4 WAR, 6.23 ERA. But the man posted 25 games pitched in, including one in garbage time against the Rangers at the end of the season, which was just an absolute shocker to see. But I mean, I think that a time to move on for Jordan Montgomery might be here, but the man exercised his $22.5 million player option, as is his right. I can't imagine how good it felt to just stick it to the guy that's cutting you a $22.5 million check about a month after he said, just a horrible decision. Well, a horrible decision. You're going to have to keep on paying me, my friend. But I think that is kind of a time to go. But before we get into what I think would make sense for a Jordan Montgomery trade, I'm curious as to your thoughts why he said Jordan Montgomery was the biggest problem. Obviously, not a great season for Montgomery, but there were other problems on this Diamondbacks team, including another left-handed 31-year-old starting pitcher free agent who didn't have an ERA north of 6, but did have an ERA north of 5 and only pitched in 10 games. I'm talking about Eduardo Rodriguez. Why was Eduardo Rodriguez not the biggest problem? Because, I mean, even though Monty got lit up, he was at least there.
Yeah, it's definitely fair. I mean, when you look at both of their numbers side by side, I mean, neither one was very good for the D-backs this season. It's maybe because I feel like Erod probably ingratiated himself with the fans a little bit better, because Monty at times he would be like, oh man, it's hot out here in Chase Field, guys. I'm sweating. I'm struggling to get through these starts. So I think there'll just be times he would make a little excuse here and there. And I think that just kind of rubbed people the wrong way, because if you look at the stats, like you mentioned, it wasn't like Erod was any better. It wasn't like a lot of those D-backs starting rotation members are really any better than Jordan Montgomery, because the D-backs pitching is what really held them back this season. So yes, Jordan Montgomery ended up getting a lot of the blame. I think part of it's also because I think he's probably regarded as a better pitcher than Erod. I mean, he was coming off the World Series where we saw him beat our team. So to bring him in, we're like, okay, this guy has to now lead us back to the World Series and deliver us a championship. And instead he did the exact opposite and put up Madison Bumgarner level stats. So I think all of those reasons is probably why Ken Kendrick went on a media blast tour against Jordan Montgomery.
No, that's totally fair. I mean, the season that Montgomery was coming off of, I mean, he was very, very good in St. Louis, but not only for the Rangers, in the World Series, he didn't really have his best game. He actually only started one game, and that was the one game that the Diamondbacks won. The Diamondbacks pummeled Montgomery, but in the ALCS, he was phenomenal against the Astros. Pretty sure the only pitcher on planet Earth that could get Yordan Alvarez out consistently in the postseason. Just an absolute miracle worker. Same with his first start of the postseason, game one of that AL wild card round. But Jordan Montgomery was amazing down the stretch with the Rangers. 11 starts, 67 and 2/3 innings, a 2.79 ERA during that regular season. The Rangers made that trade for him at midseason. And I'm thinking the trading for Jordan Montgomery was so nice, the Rangers just might do it twice. Although I don't think Monty is worth $22.5 million next year. Probably not going to live up to that. I do think he has some bounce back in him. He was a guy who has just been so incredibly consistent. And a lot of it, no matter where the Diamondbacks do trade Jordan Montgomery, they're probably going to have to eat some amount of salary. But I have a proposal for you.
Okay.
Where the Diamondbacks don't have to eat any salary.
Okay.
Kind of a distressed assets kind of a trade. I'm thinking a straight up 1-for-1 John Gray for Jordan Montgomery. John Gray is coming off of a really rough season. He is going to make $13 million next season. Not super expensive, but he just hasn't been quite consistent for the Rangers. This was his worst season in Texas, an ERA north of 4, right around 4.5. Missed quite a bit of time, only threw about 100 innings this year. Threw 157 in 2023, but was hurt for most of the postseason, was only coming out of the bullpen and really only a couple of times, one of which was in that glorious game one that I'm sure you don't like to talk about of the World Series. But a guy who I think could bounce back and, if all else fails, I think he is an absolutely elite, electric back-end reliever. He's still probably going to want to start and could give you a decent amount of bulk. And therefore, the Rangers, who don't want to spend all that much money, this would be about $11 million in tax difference right now. Next year, Monty is going to be $25 million against the cap, even though he's only making $22.5 mil. John Gray is making $13 mil, but he is a $14 mil against the cap because he was making more in season pass. So basically, adding $11 million to that tax budget. Is that a thing you think would make sense for both sides, or at least on your Diamondback side?
Yeah, I actually don't hate the proposal because if Jordan Montgomery came back next season, like he's truly fighting for a rotation spot with Erod, with Ryan Nelson. But I think bringing in a John Gray actually makes the roles a little bit more clear where it's like, you know what, John Gray, you may not be in this rotation. Maybe you're just our long reliever because our guy last year, Bryce Jarvis, he got hurt. I don't know what his status is going to next year. So John Gray could be that perfect long reliever for the D-backs. And then if there's injuries, like we saw the D-backs this past year where we felt like we had the deepest rotation in baseball. And then guess what? You can still lose Gallen, Kelly, Erod, and Monty all at the same point and still be down a whole lot of dudes. So John Gray can at least come in, be a great back-end reliever for the D-backs. And in case there's injuries, can also step in as a veteran and also step up in that rotation. So I actually don't hate that on the face value, especially if you're saying the D-backs don't have to give up any money. If you're saying the Rangers just going to take it, because I truly believe Jordan Montgomery is going to be like one of the best buy lows that you could get as a trade candidate, because why can't he just bounce back to where he was? Like he was, if you look at his prior 3 years to D-backs, he was getting better every single season. And then he had this weird offseason where he just takes it off because he's a Scott Boras client. He comes in extremely out of shape. Like if he just does all the things right this offseason and works with his new team throughout the whole training camp, like why can't Monty go back to being like a number 2 starter for a team next season?
Yeah, I think even that the Rangers wouldn't really be asking him to be, that guy. I'm assuming they're going to have a lot of interest in bringing back Nathan Eovaldi. Other than that, I don't think they're adding all that much to the rotation, unless by some miracle they pull off Roki Sasaki. Definitely going to be in on that. But and I never doubt Chris Young, the salesman, who was able to convince Marcus Semien and Corey Seager to sign here coming off of a 100-loss season. Now he has proof of concept and a ring. Maybe that makes him a little bit better of a negotiator and a salesman, especially when the price tag won't really limit him in a way that this past offseason did. I would love to bring back Jordan Montgomery. He's still beloved here by the fans and just a guy who has been very, very durable. The Rangers rotation next year has a lot of upside. Jacob deGrom is may have heard of him. He throws baseballs pretty well occasionally. Kumar Rocker, prospect with a lot of upside, showed some really nice flashes down the stretch. Tyler Mahle is a guy who is also coming off of Tommy John surgery. I guess technically it's modified UCL repair surgery, but there's a lot of guys with a lot of questions about their health. John Gray is one of them, and that's the quality that I think that Jordan Montgomery, no matter how good or bad he is, for the most part, he has been a fairly durable pitcher, and that's why I think a reunion to Texas could make a lot of sense. But these two teams both were sitting on their couches in October after playing all the way to November 1st last year. We're going to talk about what that World Series hangover did to these teams and a couple of free agents from each side that could make sense on the other team right after this. This episode is brought to you by SelectQuote. The World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top-level sporting events thanks to one thing: teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when they're shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy and keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. Other life insurance brokers offer impersonal, one-size-fits-all policies that may cost you more and cover you less, while SelectQuote's licensed insurance agents work for you to tailor a life insurance policy for your individual needs in as little as 15 minutes. If you're in good health, they work with carriers that could get you same-day coverage for up to $5 million, no medical exam required. Head to SelectQuote.com and a licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life and your budget. SelectQuote. They shop, you save. Get the right life insurance policy for you for less at SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Go to SelectQuote.com/lockedon today to get started. That's SelectQuote.com/lockedon. Now, the World Series hangover was about as deadly a hangover as you can have for the Rangers, but also for the Diamondbacks. Both these teams missing out on October entirely. Diamondbacks having a much better overall season than the Rangers, and I don't know if you've put this all together, but if the Diamondbacks were in the AL West with their current record, with their 2024 record, they would have won the AL West at 89-73, one game worse than the Rangers and Astros were in 2023. But I'm curious, where do you think this World Series hangover affected your team the most?
Well, I would like to think if the D-backs were in the AL West, maybe it's D-backs Dodgers World Series after seeing the Yankees go through the American League and how bad it was. But that's a fun hypothetical topic for another day. For me, I think where you really saw it go wrong for the D-backs was that first half of the season, because this team got off to such a slow start and they were just doing so many things uncharacteristic to what they did in 2023, where it's like, where was the speed? Where was the chaos of this team? Like, they were so bad at base running to begin the season. Their defense was terrible to begin the year. Like, stuff that was the calling card of the D-backs like the last few years, all of a sudden they weren't good at to begin the year. Corbin Carroll was one, quite literally, if you go by like WRC plus the first half of the year, like those first 80 games, like he was like bottom 6 in Major League Baseball those first 80 games. So he was struggling. Lourdes Gurriel, like up and down the lineup outside of like Ketel Marte, Jock Peterson, Christian Walker, most of this team was struggling. And then you were dealing with injuries as well with Gallen and Merrill Kelly, and Paul Sewald wasn't there to begin the year. And you had Erod to miss the season as well. So there were just so many different factors that really hurt this D-back team. But hey, as soon as that second half hit, as soon as like game 81 hit, Eugenio turned into Babe Ruth. Corbin Carroll once again looked like the rookie of the year. And this team took off in the second half of the season until the final month, where this D-backs team faltered. The pitching sucked. And somehow this team ended up with 5 more wins than last year. Number 1 scoring team in the National League, and missed out on the postseason. Very interesting year. How about you, Bryce?
So you're saying Corbin Carroll? I mean, maybe we throw Corbin Carroll in there, a salary dump. I hear he's going to make a whole bunch of money. You gotta get. I'm sorry, I couldn't even keep a straight face. Yeah, really interesting season for the Diamondbacks. I mean, one of the best offense. Actually, I'm pretty sure the best offense in baseball.
By a lot. By like 50 runs or something
crazy. And the Rangers, they slugged their way to the 2023 World Series and through the 2023 World Series. Just an incredibly deep and talented offense. So many guys all the way up and down that lineup. and you thought, okay, Rangers don't really need to sign anybody in free agency. Their offense is going to be, maybe even better than 2023 because they're adding Wyatt Langford every day. One of the top rookies in all baseball. He also adding a full season of Evan Carter.
We like him too.
We thought, a hopefully healthier season for Josh Young.
Like him
we
too.
Thought, and nope, that wasn't the case. You had offensive regression from everybody. Outside of Josh Smith, who just won his first career Silver Slugger, Smith stepped up for Josh Young, who missed the vast majority of the season, getting hit by a pitch in Game 4, right on the wrist, broke his wrist, took off for 2 months to get that fully repaired. Then when he came back, it still wasn't right, had some lingering issues. And for the youngster Evan Carter, he played 45 games this year, had a back issue, and just never got back. And they finally figured out what it was. They're hoping that it's not going to be a lingering issue. But the thought was, okay, hopefully this team can slug its way to winning a bunch of games, not getting into an early hole, which they somehow didn't. They didn't get into an early hole. They were still theoretically contending by the time we hit the trade deadline. This team went for it at the trade deadline. The starting pitching that was thought to be, this is going to be horrible starting pitching. There's no way the Rangers can survive while they wait for the likes of Scherzer and Malley and DeGrom to get off the IL and, be those reinforcements down the stretch. They weren't really that much of reinforcements, but the guys who were there, the Eovaldes of the world, the Andrew Heaney's, heck, Cody Bradford had a sensational season.
Yes.
And this team just couldn't get it done. The bullpen that was horrendous in 2023, they signed basically two guys. Jose Urena is second and a half guy, but they signed Kirby Yates and David Robertson. They said, okay, bullpen fixed. And last winter, I thought, there's no way you fix this whole bullpen with two guys. And they basically did, because Yates and Robertson were amazing. But it's just wild that basically every single offensive player outside of Josh Smith had a massive fall off. And so the hope is for 2025 is like, maybe they don't stink next year.
So that's where I was gonna ask you, like, how much do you think like this season was just a fluke where it's like I can't expect my whole lineup to just suck again, where it's like from top to bottom? Like for the D-backs, it's like I can't expect my whole rotation to just be hurt again with having the best offense. Like I feel like both of our teams are going to be like pretty prime for a massive bounce back in 2025.
I think so. I think these teams went too much in the other direction of like, Rangers pitching was much better than expected. The offense stunk. And then the D-backs is just like, wow, the offense is absolutely unbeatable. This pitching staff stinks. Maybe we just kind of do a little bitty swapperoo and both these teams get back to the middle. We see a repeat of that 2023 World Series in 2025. And we have everyone whining and moaning again about how, these aren't the teams that everybody wants. This is so dumb. Ratings, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure you're just as sick of it too. But unfortunately, your team doesn't get to have, maybe your team will next time get to have pull the World Series trophy out, be like, boom, suck it. I don't care who watched. My team won it all. You still get to be like, hey, suck it. My team made it to the World Series. I don't care how many people were watching. That was a really good Diamondbacks team in 2023 and in 2024. And there's a lot of young pieces that were fantastic. I'm curious from the outside, were you very surprised at this Rangers team not, falling completely on its face? Because I didn't see this, fall off coming.
I guess so, especially when compared to like the other teams that they were going against in the American League, where it's like you couldn't catch like the Detroit Tigers and like teams like that were making it to the postseason, where the Tigers definitely had a great year, but like on paper, the talent, the Rangers crushed them in just like the head-to-head on paper matchup. And so it's like, when you look at it from like that perspective, I think it was a very, very surprising season, especially when you consider like the Rangers were like one of those teams in like fantasy baseball where it's like, I could just stack that whole lineup and be fine. And it's like, if you did that this year, you probably had a pretty crappy fantasy baseball team. So definitely shocked with how much the production wasn't there for that Rangers offense after thinking maybe that's like arguably the best lineup in baseball.
Yeah, it definitely was. And the Rangers have some switcheroos at coaches. Their hitting coach, Tim Hires, is going to Atlanta. They hired the former San Francisco Giants hitting coach to come in and work with Donnie Ecker. Those are the two masterminds of the 2021 San Francisco Giants offense that just shocked everybody and was just one of the best offenses we've frankly ever seen. And it was just a bunch of old guys who everyone thought were washed up. And maybe those two working together again could be a tandem to fix this Rangers offense. But I think the Rangers, they can count on a lot of bounce back for some of these guys like a Lowe, like a Heim, like Simeon and Langford, taking that step forward, and Adolis Garcia getting back to more of what we thought he was. But I would kind of like one free agent bat, maybe a DH, to kind of come in and supplement this offense. And I think there's someone who was on your team last year that might fill that role. We'll talk about that right after this. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Now, there are a couple of free agents that were on the Diamondbacks this year who had some fantastic seasons, hitters specifically, not so much on the pitching side of the free agents there. But the Rangers have some guys who are free agent pitchers who might do well on the Diamondbacks. I want to start by asking you about two guys who I think would be just perfect fits on the Rangers that are free agents. One is Randall Grichuk, and the other is Jock Peterson. Let's start with Jock, who had just an absolutely amazing season, very under the radar, one of the better hitters in baseball this season. What made Jock so darn good this year?
Yeah, I think the two guys we're going to discuss, the two DHs for the D-backs, maybe have the two most underrated seasons by any, baseball player offensively this year, because Jock Peterson, I mean, both those guys, just straight platoon players with how Torey Lovullo used them. Jock played pretty much exclusively against right-handed pitchers, and he crushed right-handed pitching this season. Power bat did exactly what we want him to do. And as you know, with Jock Peterson, he likes to pimp the big home runs, and he was clutch. You check the stats, runners in scoring position, high leverage numbers. Like, I don't know how repeatable those numbers are, but this season for the D-backs, he absolutely crushed. And there's a reason why this man is nicknamed Jocktober, because he comes alive in the biggest moments, and he did that all season. You could watch a couple of clips where he crushes some big home runs late in games, and he's screaming, pumping his chest, I'm him. So we love Jock Peterson. I'm very upset he declined his mutual option, because he's definitely going to get probably a better deal this offseason.
But about Randall Grichuk, I think that one might make more sense for Texas. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are big bidders on Jock Peterson. The Rangers have a lot of lefties in their lineup: Nathaniel Lowe, Corey Seager, Evan Carter. Two of those three, I'm pretty sure, can hit lefties well. Carter still figuring all of that out. So I think maybe more of a right-handed hitting bat who can absolutely crush lefties is more of a fit with Randall Grichuk. This was maybe the best offensive season of his career. Yeah. If not the best, then definitely one of. This was a real resurgent kind of year. Was there some kind of tweak or something that he make to kind of have this kind of an offensive season? I mean, outside of Coors, this is about as good as he's done.
Yeah, I did not expect this. I was like, oh, Randall, like, for what we're bringing him to be like our eighth guy, like our second DH, I was like, oh, this is like a perfect cherry on top for the offseason. Then he comes in and plays 162 games, and you're like, oh, this guy played like a star this year, like an all-star level player. Like, he put up fantastic numbers defensively, who was great. And another guy, you check the clutch stats, him and Jock Peterson murdered in clutch situations this year. Randall Grichuk late in games, he had a couple of game winners, walk-offs. I don't know if they were walk-offs, but they're like runs to put us ahead, I remember, at least. So Grichuk and both Jock Peterson were super clutch this season. And honestly, Grichuk was a guy I was like, can we get him in the lineup more? Because I'm pretty sure like his splits against like lefties too, or excuse me, against righties was like fine. I don't think he was like that bad against right-handed
Yeah, he
pitchers.
had an amazing OPS against righties, but versus lefties. I mean, a 914 OPS against lefties and 801 against righties. So
Yeah, it wasn't bad
not
at all.
not bad at all. That's
That's like
good.
good.
That's straight up
Like,
good.
that's an all-star actually. Yeah. So it's like I was like fine with Toy Lavello, like down the stretch. Like we need, I mean, obviously we already have the best offense, but I'm like Grichuk is like on fire every time he plays. And it's like, how does this guy not get in the lineup more? You don't have to stick to your platoon splits, Tori. Look at the numbers. He crushes right-handed pitching too. So Randall Grichuk is a guy. I'm also very upset that he declined his mutual option because I mean it was like $6 million. Like he's probably going to make double
That's a
that.
steal. That's an
Yeah,
absolute
like,
steal
insane.
for a
So
guy
like,
like that.
yeah.
But on the Rangers side, the Rangers have a few starting pitching free agents, one of whom, Andrew Heaney, did pitch. Actually, both of these guys that we're about to talk about did pitch in that World Series. Heaney was a guy who went from being someone who I was really concerned about his health and his durability heading in. I mean, he is just not a guy who had stayed healthy, who'd been durable for the long haul before the Rangers signed him to that deal. I mean, he was coming off a season where he pitched in 16 games with the Dodgers, had a 3.10 ERA, a crazy strikeout rate, but just out shy of 73 innings that year. And I mean, he'd only pitched more than 150 innings once in his career. That was back in 2018 with the Angels. It was 3 teams ago. I guess 4 teams ago if he goes somewhere else besides the Rangers. But the last couple of years, I mean, he has been an absolute durable workhorse. 28 starts in 2023, also was healthy throughout the postseason. Ideally, not a guy who you want in your postseason rotation, but stepped up and did a good job down the stretch with the Rangers. Didn't have any horrible starts in the postseason. And then this year, 31 starts, 32 games overall, and 160 innings. I mean, combined over 300 the last couple of years. He's a guy who I think could make sense. He's not flashy. Those strikeout numbers aren't quite the same. He did a better job of pitching deeper into games this year and limiting those walks. He's just a fine back end rotation pitcher. And, for a Diamondbacks team that could have used 1 or 2 more fine back end rotation guys that aren't going to kill you, aren't going to wow you. I think that could make a lot of sense. Do you think so?
He could be interesting. I look at him more again like the John Gray, maybe the long reliever type. Like if I'm picking one of these Texas Rangers potential free agent pitchers, like I want the cream of the crop. And I want like a Nathan Eovaldi, who at this point is not the same guy he once was, definitely deals with injuries, but I could still see him being like the number 4 starter in my rotation.
Number 4 starter, Nathan Eovaldi. Get out of town. Your number 2 starter had a 4.5 ERA last year. Get out of town with that.
Are you taking Eovaldi over Zach Allen and Merrill Kelly right now? Still no.
I'm taking him over Merrill Kelly for sure. I mean, you talk about him missing time. He missed 3 starts this year. 29 starts, 170 innings this year, and a 3.8 ERA. The guy's still got it.
No, he's good. I think Merrill Kelly's just honestly straight up better than Eovaldi. That's just like a guy that watches like Kelly every day. I think because I'm locked in on Eovaldi.
If you watch Nathan Eovaldi I mean, you follow the Red Sox pretty closely when he was there.
Yeah, I think
the kind of dog he is.
I think Kelly's slightly better than Eovaldi. And then also at this point, Fott probably like head to head, like in a vacuum, maybe Eovaldi's better, but like by game 162 by playoffs next year, Fott could be better than Eovaldi as well.
He's not going to be better in the playoffs. I guarantee you that. You've seen firsthand the kind of man that can be in the playoffs. I watched back game 5 and the way that man works himself out of jam time and time again. It wasn't just that game. It was the entire ALCS as well. But one guy who didn't pitch that much in that postseason, honestly didn't pitch that much during the regular season, that I think could make sense for the Arizona Diamondbacks, is a guy who's been a Diamondback before. That's right, Max Scherzer, who I guarantee you is not looking to hang it up. He is 40 years old, coming off of a season where he was just not there. I mean, he had a back issue that he had surgery on in the offseason, so he was projected to come back some point in June. Then it looked like he was going to come back in the early part of May. That didn't end up happening, kept on pushing it back and back and back. Only ended up making 9 starts and just over 43 innings, still had a sub-4 ERA, and I really think there's a lot left on the table with Scherzer. There's obviously some injury concerns. He is old, but he's also Max freaking Scherzer. So if you're going to bet on somebody to bounce back and, give you 20, 25 starts of better than league average starter stuff, because when he was on the hill, he still had it. Wasn't just like getting lit up like Justin Verlander was. I mean, he still was putting out some decent numbers. Is that something that interests you at all? Or are you just like, absolutely not? I'm terrified.
He's interesting, but it's all for like back end stuff. Like, I just don't know like what level he's going to be at next year. Like, can you really trust him to go like pitch deep into like games? Can you trust him to pitch like deep into a season? Like, I think there's just too much risk probably around Scherzer. Like, I probably want more like the Evaldi, if I'm going for like a back end long reliever, give me more of the John Gray, Andrew Heaney. Like, Scherzer still super tempting, the Hall of Fame guy, be a great story, come back to where it all started, but probably just too much risk. And he still probably has too much cachet, to be honest. Like, what do you actually do with Max Scherzer? Like, I still think he probably has too much name value. I don't know. The production is always going to live up to it. So he might just be like too much of an issue, to be honest.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he just like signed on the Dodge and just kind of like chilled out there. And it's like, oh, I'm just gonna make sure that you're ready by the time we hit the postseason, because we have 18 bazillion guys on here and all of them are getting hurt all the time. So like, why not just go add another famous guy who's gonna want to pitch on a contender? I was just throwing that out there because I thought, you know what, there's a nice little story there, and I'm sure you would like a Nathan Eovaldi on your team, but I called dibs. So I think in free agency, that's maybe how that works. Not entirely sure, but I think there could be some interesting fits if a Randal Grichuk ends up on my team, if a Andrew Heaney or a John Gray ends up on your team. That type of a trade, I think the Monty trade, if it works out, if it happens, I think it could work out very, very well for both sides in a way that we really could see these two teams coming back and facing off again in the World Series in 2025. That's what I am hoping for. It would be almost as delightful as this crossover. Millard, thank you so much for joining me, y'all. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time.
Wait, I'm not done here, Bryce.
Oh, you're not.
I want to say something before I go. I want the listeners to do something for me. I want to get a poll started. I want to get something going in the comments section. Drop a comment. Who do you think is better? Because I'm still thinking about it. Nathan Eovaldi versus Merrill Kelly. I might put something out on the Twitter as well. Maybe make a fun graphic for it. Just drop in the comments section. Who do you think is better right now, Kelly or Eovaldi? I just want to see what the listeners say. All right.
Oh, let's hear from the people. Hear from the people. Let their voices speak. Y'all, thank you so much for listening. Millard, thanks so much for joining me. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.